So yesterday I finished the verses from this small little one-page part of this book, which is 800 pages long. And what I went through was one page. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about where these verses fit into this book. So this is a book called Nagarjuna on the Six Perfections. An Arya Bodhisattva explains the heart of the Bodhisattva path. So Nagarjuna in this book is explaining about the six perfections. And I made a mistake earlier. Nagarjuna was from the 1st or 2nd century, not the 4th. So these verses were from chapter 19, where he's talking about the characteristics and the import or importance of dana, or giving. And so I thought I'd read a little bit from the beginning of this to place where these verses were falling in and give a bigger picture of it. So the question is, what is meant by dana, or giving? And then the response, dana, or giving, refers to an instance of giving wherein there is a corresponding instance of wholesome intentionality. This is what is meant by dana. So it's referring to, giving is actually, has a lot to do with our intention, and it's a mental event, so to speak. And then it goes on, there are those who say that the arising of physical and verbal actions following from wholesome intentionality may also qualify as dana. So then that meaning that the actions that we do with our speech and our body, some people also say are dana. There are others who say that dana refers to the coming together of three factors: faith or confidence, a field of blessings, and a material object. And this field of blessings was kind of interesting to read about in the footnote. Field of blessings here is the recipient of any act of giving. And it's so named because, figuratively speaking, giving plants a seed wherein one reaps in the future the fruit of one's generosity. And so the earliest origins of this, apparently from this footnote, are the patchwork design of our monastic robes, it says here. Very early on, the Buddha ordered Ananda to incorporate such a design into the monastic's outer robe, and he did so in order to illustrate this concept. So when we see the patchwork of robes, we can think about giving and in general the six perfections. And he also did this because he wanted the monastic robes to look different from the other ascetics of the time. That's what it says here. So that means that this giving is three factors coming together. And then the mind that does this generates this dharma of relinquishing, capable of destroying miserliness. And so then he goes on talking about, well, there's three types. One that's giving, that's attached to the desire realm, one that's not attached to the desire realm, and one that's attached to the desire realm, one to the form realm, and one that's neither. And then goes on to explain what's pure and what's impure giving. And this is the part I wanted to kind of focus on today. So he gave 18 examples of impure giving. It may involve superficial giving in which one takes no interest. So here he gives these 18 examples. That's one. Or it may be perhaps done for obtaining wealth, or because one feels ashamed, or as a means of kind of putting others down in a little way, or giving out of terror, or to draw attention to oneself in a favorable way, or out of fear of being killed, or with the intention to manipulate someone so that they'll feel pleased, giving out of a feeling of obligation, or giving because you're trying to dominate, or out of jealousy or hatred or arrogance, to elevate yourself over somebody, or for the sake of fame or reputation, or to kind of lend some kind of efficacy to prayers and rituals, or to try to do away with any misfortune, or to gain a following, or just to do it in a disrespectful way that makes another person feel poorly. So these are called impure giving, and then what we want to try to cultivate is pure giving, which is basically the opposite of that. And so when the pure mind arises, they're talking about getting rid of all the fetters. And this is what these verses were about, really, was the verses were actually kind of helping us to look at our mind and see what afflictions arise in our minds when we're giving. And then it also had to do with the effects. The verses that we read were in the portion of this chapter that talked about the effects of giving. And so that's the title of this is How Giving Gets Rid of the Afflictions. And that's why we went through all the afflictions, these like 18 or 20 verses, and what the antidote was. And in some sense, the way I think of this is that, giving is one of the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections contain the whole path. And so if by giving you're working on all these afflictions, then you will get what they're talking about at the very end here. All sorts of unwholesome afflictions such as these become scant when one cultivates the practice of giving. And so this is, basically the road to our own liberation to do this. So I'll just read these verses that we spent I did one on each session, so a number of sessions going over. So, and remember that when giving, because one's afflictions become slight, thereby one is able to progress towards nirvana. So here are the verses. By not clinging to the object which is given, one gets rid of miserliness. By being respectfully mindful to the recipient, one gets rid of jealousy. By giving with a straight mind, one gets rid of deviousness. By giving with a unified mind, one gets rid of agitation. By giving with deep thoughts, one gets rid of regretfulness. By contemplating the meritorious qualities of the recipient, one gets rid of irreverence. By focusing one's own mind, one gets rid of an absence of a sense of shame. By becoming aware of another's marvelous qualities, one gets rid of an absence of dread of blame, the dread of blame. By not being attached to the objects of material wealth, one gets rid of covetousness. By feeling kindness and sympathy for the recipient, one gets rid of hatefulness. By being respectfully mindful to the recipient, one gets rid of arrogance. By learning to cultivate a wholesome dharma, one gets rid of ignorance. By believing that there are resultant rewards or effects, one gets rid of erroneous views. On account of knowing that there will definitely be a retribution or an effect, one gets rid of doubtfulness. All sorts of unwholesome afflictions such as these become scant when one cultivates the practice of giving. And then later in this chapter, just the next page, there's an explanation of how the 32 marks of a Buddha result from giving. It says, there are those who say that giving generates the causes and conditions for the development of the 32 marks. And it goes into an explanation of each mark and how giving is the cause or condition of that. So this is a book that a monk in Seattle has translated many of Nagarjuna's works from the Chinese canon. His name is Bhikkhu Dharmamitra, and this is called Kalavinka Buddhist Classics. So these books are really quite wonderful to read. They have a lot of stories. We often have a hard time getting things in English from the Chinese canon, and Nagarjuna is central to pretty much every Buddhist tradition, I believe. Definitely the Tibetan tradition and the Chinese take his teachings to heart. So may we benefit from working with our minds and getting rid of our afflictions slowly, so that we can become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings.